The great thing about poetry, which I discovered in the early 60s, there are no rules. So I've been living here for more than 50 years, and it's changed, you can imagine. About every 10 or 11 or 14 years, it's a major change, sort of it. But it's been like this, more or less, for 20 some odd years. I moved in here in 65, and William Burroughs moved into the bunker in 75. I discovered this here. There were shelves here. And this is from the YMCA in 1884. They had the building painted white walls with this brown stripe around. And when I took it off, when it stopped being a white, what they did is the dirty boys leaned against the wall. And when it got too dirty, they would just paint it brown. And I thought, oh, this is like Pompeii, you know? As you will see coming over here, it was called the Young Men's Institute. It's begun by these two brothers who got Cornelius Vanderbilt to build this building. And here's all the documentation. There was an elevator train here. This is the opening year. And over there on that wall, there's a list of the contributors, you know, like John D. Rockefeller the first gave $500. A lot of them gave $500, but $500 in 1883 was probably a fortune, you know. So this is the landmark part of the building. I have 3 lofts here. This is a loft where I sleep and work here. You can see that's what I do here. That's my the computer is over there. And then I have a studio below this, similar, where is my painting studio, where we do the silkscreen paintings and the drawings and the watercolors and then in the back of this building is the bunker where William Burroughs lived. Many great things happened on that top floor loft. Like we were all, Wynn as well as me, was a friend of Andy Warhol. So Sleep was first shown up there. And it was shown up there first to Jonas Mekas, who immediately put it on the cover of Film Culture in 1963. And so all of these things happened. And I'm a Tibetan Buddhist, and this is a shrine, and these are Tibetan books. And every year, for many years, I think this year will be the 32nd year, that on New Year's Day, and the 2 days around New Year, like the Saturday and Sunday, whatever it is, we do a Tibetan Buddhist fire ritual, fire puja, in the Nyingma tradition. Well, being a Buddhist, what you do is meditation practice, and that has to do with training the mind, and training the mind results in sort of these things happening to the mind. It affected my poetry, I think, understanding the empty nature of mind. If you belong to a poetic tradition, you function in that mode. You know, if you write sonnets, you write sonnets, or in the New York School of Poetry, there's a style of writing, a style of writing, and complicated in the sense that it has a whole ideology, and so they belong to that. And each of the at least. So there was the Frank O'Hara and John Ashbery, but there's about 10 of them who are my generation or a little bit younger, and so they were my peer group, but I didn't write like them. I didn't write like anybody. So I had this great freedom. I could do anything I want. This caused me a lot of trouble because you get no support, you know. But I didn't need any support. Everything I did was self-generated energy, relatively successful, and I went on for 60 years. And even before I met Vito, in the early 62, 3, 4, why is poetry so pathetic? And why is it boring? Why is it, and you just say, well, you can't hear the words. Nobody thought of sound systems. There was really, you know, the early, so like 60 and 61 was really the 50s, which is like the 1930s. Nobody thought about PA poetry. And so it was, so we just on that basic level started thinking about things, and then just these little doors open up, you know, that I meet William Burroughs and Brion Gysin, and Brion is connected to the sound poets in Paris, Poésie Sonore. 3 or 4 months later, he says to me, we should collaborate. Me and him should collaborate. You're the poet, and I'll do a sound composition. So we did.
You give us 22 minutes. You give us 22 minutes. You give us 22 minutes. And we'll give you the world, and we'll give you the world, and we'll give you the world. 'Cause when you're smiling, the whole world smiles with you, the whole world smiles with you, the whole world smiles with you, the whole world. When you're laughing, the sun comes shining through, the sun comes shining through, the sun when you're crying. But when you're crying, you bring on the rain.
And then I did every possible thing I thought I could do, because I met all the great engineers and I worked with everybody. And after 15 years, I had done everything I thought I could do. So that's it. I'm not good. So I actually ended and started working with music for another 10 years, a rock and roll band, which was wonderful. And then starting in 1989, I just did solo. Solo to now because it's just using the voice as an instrument, which is the least complicated for anybody and for me. The genesis of my life is that I'm a poet, and being a poet, I've been able to work in different venues or in different artistic forms. So as a poet, I write, and the next step is always, for me, rehearsing it, or the sound of the word, which takes it in the direction of performance, which then becomes like music. So it's an elaborate process, but it's different than being a poet, because I'm dealing more with principles of a singer, yet I'm not musically trained. I've sort of trained myself about breath, and so I use it the way I think a little bit influenced by breathing in Tibetan Buddhism, internal breathing, and so that's performance.
Disappointment. And you're eating pizza, and you're eating pizza, and you're eating pizza, and you're eating Oreo cookies, and you're eating Oreo cookies, and you're eating Oreo cookies. And I don't care. I'm getting fat. I don't care if I'm getting fat. I'm hungry. I've always been hungry.
I'm a poet with my words making pictures, but the consideration of a painter is really the surface and the color, or whatever you're doing with color, and how that has nothing to do with the words. But I've been able to meld it. So I make these paintings, for countless decades now. But that's a separate skill, being a poet, and there are no doubt other skills, In the 1960s, it seemed to me that painting and sculpture poetry was 75 years behind painting and sculpture. And then what's happened in the last 60 years, poetry has had a golden age. Since I said those words, there's countless other people who've made it happen. I think something very interesting has happened with poetry. It's changed over the last 50 years. And poetry is in the process of changing its skin. And nobody quite knows what it is, poetry today. It's my question 50 years ago. And this is a good thing, because poetry never dies. It's just, you can't kill poetry. It's like trying to kill, it's hopeless. But it's very interesting when it changes its skin, because it just means the older traditions, but see, it's already happened. And I can't quite, what it has to do with the way technology has changed our minds and the way people individually work with words and their sensitivity words, texting, and just all of those things. It's a monumental art now. So it's curious, this is a monumental change in poetry. So it's been a really golden age of poetry.
We will create a world for you. We will create a world for you. I'll wait for you. I'll wait for you. I'll wait for you. And I miss not having. I never got it. Orange and blue stripe curtains, and the long low desk and drawers of desk and drawers of bed. Long low desk and drawers of bed.
Poems are instruments of wisdom. It awakens something in one's mind. I have a theory of me performing. When you're performing and you perform in all this breath, you get a little bit abstract, or it's a little bit, and you just see these dumb words I'm saying, and people are having this enormous emotional response. You can feel it, see it, and it's over. And I'm just doing this thing with my voice, and you see that it's not my words, because I also understand my words. They're seeing something that's in their mind. So they're what I would call wisdom or something. They're seeing the wisdom that's inherent in their minds, and they think it's my words. but maybe my words allow them to see themselves or to see the wisdom in them. So everybody's always seeing themselves. And that same thing happens to me when I read a great poem. Something lights up in my heart. I think there's so many levels of poetry. What interests me is the nature of mind, and so that's what I work with. But this for me, hip hop is great. This is a huge poetic form, and countless other forms. So it's up to the poet. The great thing about poetry, which I discovered in the early '60s, there are no rules. What I would discover, as long as you follow your mind correctly and manifest things, that there are no rules. Laurie Anderson, William Burroughs, and I had an album that I brought out, Giorno Poetry Systems, in 1980, I think, and it was called. And it was three of us. We each had a side, and three of us were on one side. And we did a short tour. It was great. San Francisco, Los Angeles, and New York. I think they don't exist anymore, but it was like the Roxy in New York, and it was sort of a great moment. It was 1980. In the days of William Burroughs, which is sort of the late 70s into the 80s, and until he died, he kept coming back to visit and do his New York business. So we used to have dinner up here often, or dinner in the bunker. Sometimes I cooked up here, or whatever, we alternate. So you can imagine decades of dinner parties here and downstairs. So this is the bunker of William Burroughs, and his bedroom is over there. And this is the kitchen, or our dining room, where we were given the countless dinners have been given. He first rented it in '75 until '82, when he moved out at the first days of '82. This is the orgone box of Wilhelm Reich, belonging to William Burroughs. Had himself built an orgone box. First on Franklin Street, and then when he moved here, he bought it here. And the idea was that you sit in there, and it's Wilhelm Reich, so there's a layer of metal, an organic layer of wood, and then there was originally sort of what they call a real organic, like a bear skin, covering the whole thing. And if you sat in there, you would collect. This is William Burroughs. He would be collecting orgone energy, we would be collecting orgone energy, which has this power. And he drank a lot of vodka. So I said, how could you get up in the morning with a hangover and go and sit in one of these things? The hangover is enough you have to get rid of before you start collecting your orgone. And then it was here, but he believed in those sort of things.
I was with William Burroughs when he died, and it was one of the best times I ever had with him. Doing Tibetan Nyingma Buddhist meditation practices, I absorbed his consciousness into my heart.
William just had a very brilliant mind. He was a joy to be with, because no matter how great his work is very great, it's transcendent, and he was a really great, brilliant writer. But he was more great in the downtime here, because he liked to start drinking at 5 or 6 o'clock, vodka, Coca-Cola. So we'd either come up or I'd go down, and then I waited till 6 or 6:30 to go down. And when he would have a couple of glasses of vodka and a couple of joints, his mind was just so brilliant. And then we'd have dinner, and whatever, people came for dinner, or we had dinner alone. So doing that for those endless years and years, that was a great lesson. I'm not sure what the lesson is, though.
Death smells. Death has a special smell, over and above the smell of cyanide, cordite, blood, carrion, or burnt flesh. It's a gray smell. It stops the heart and cuts off the breath.
So this is where it all happened, at this table. William sitting in one of these chairs or whatever. That's a blowgun, that's a target. There was a whole procedure that William would stand over there. When everybody had 1 or 2 vodkas and smoked a few joints, it was always the time for the blowgun. Year after year, it was one of those like habitual patterns. And then, of course, William was a great gun person, so these are targets that he did. That's him. I think one of those is mine. And he very much admired that. That was a good shot of his. He lived here very quietly, and he got up by him, whatever he got. Well, he was a very early riser, so he would get up at around 7 or 8 and take his methadone, because by the time, at one point he started taking methadone. At 8 maybe, and then by 9 he was high by the methadone. And he got dressed and put on like a suit, like a shirt suit and a vest, and then he would go over. This was his typewriter, so this is the one he wrote these books on. Cities of the Red Night. This typewriter on that gray desk over there was on the far wall. And it's amazing. I mean, I had one like this too, you know, but this is how he wrote Cities of the Red Night and half of Place of Dead Roads.
It seemed like a bright, white light, blinding but muted. I was the vehicle, his consciousness passing through me. A gentle shooting star came in my heart and up the central channel and out the top of my head to a pure field of great clarity and bliss.
Down there is shoes. You know, there was he left all his clothes here, but at one point I said, after he died, I said, "Oh, dead man's shoes." So those are dead man's shoes, Williams. And then his peculiarities, that he always believed there could be chaos and catastrophe. So every house should be a vessel to be able to save enough water to live for 4 days. So that's why that was there, or it was someplace in it. And that's a gun of his. That's from the Civil War. I mean, it's actually, you can fire it. I mean, you do this thing, you push like that, and you put a bullet in it, boom. That's the chair. I mean, where he sat all the time. I'm not sure where everything is. So, this is the gun where we used to BB shoot with a telephone book. I mean, I saved it. It's not here. It's in my archive. That has 10,000 shots in it because this is legal. But it's quite a bullet that penetrates a telephone book. So this was his. Well, I'm not sure exactly why, but he comes from it's a generational thing of his, being born sort of the coming of age as a young person in the 1920s and into the 30s, living in the country, you know, in St. Louis, but also outside, and being alone and being frail. I don't know where I don't think his family was shooters, you know, and somehow it entered his life, all of those things. And I don't know exactly why. It's self-defense, of course. He was a junkie and lived quite poorly, often in many dangerous places, and then of course had the worst taste in boys. I mean, what he liked in London, because those are not so. Here he would say, "Why does anybody want to sleep with me? I look like somebody from Bergen-Belsen," you know. Yeah, and he did. He was all his bones and. But over there, when he had these boys, they were, you know, 19-year-old street kids, trouble. One had murdered somebody, one of the Tangiers had murdered some, you know, it was all these troublesome kids, you know. But that was his sexual choice. And these are sort of Williams, that's Williams' gun magazine. He loved rifle magazines, guns. This is a monthly magazine, I think.
It was very powerful. William Burroughs resting in great equanimity and the vast, empty expanse of primordial wisdom mind.
I'm about to be 81, and I've been good fortune enough to do everything I wanted to do. As I've explained today, all these things that came to mind, I was able to manifest in this world, you know, and that's very lucky to do. I was sort of unencumbered, and managed to escape a lot of those things to prevent one. And so I think that's very lucky. And I think about Buddhists are never afraid of death, you know, because particularly when you get to be old, because you've done so much practice. I've done so many things in this world. The next thing I have to do is die right. I mean, not die right in the sense of just dealing with my mind, like I do in meditation. That's a good habitual pattern, training the mind, and presumably that is the moment for the moment of death too. Well, there's no dying right. It's all about your mind, the state of your mind. So it's all common sense. If you better to die with a peaceful mind than with an enormous agitation or fear. And when you're a Buddhist meditation practitioner, you sort of understand fear, or you've worked with fear in your life through everything, through actual fear, and seeing the empty nature of fear. The fact that people listen to it, or particularly in these shows that have happened recently, it's in people's minds. So if it's changed people's mind, hopefully in a positive way, that was the intention, and that's enough.
I did not allow doubt to arise in my mind even for an instant, because it would allow doubt to arise in William's mind. Now I had to do it for him.